Many students in math have difficulty with word problems. One of the reasons for this, I think, is that there are a number of different types of word problems, and students have trouble identifying which type a given word problem is. In this short video, we're going to talk about how to identify one particular type of word problem. Okay, let's start by looking at 5 different word problems. Here's the first one. The buffet at Golden Corral costs $12. The sales tax is 6%. What is the total cost of the meal? Something very familiar to you, I'm sure. Nothing interesting about that one. Let's look at the second one. A taxi to the airport costs $25. You want to tip the driver 20%. What is the total cost of the ride? Right? Taxis, we're all very familiar with that situation. An Uber ride costs a flat fee of $2 plus 25 cents per mile. How much does a 30-mile trip cost? This is similar to the second problem, the taxi to the airport, except Uber allows local people to drive you instead of somebody from a formal taxi company. Next one. A savings account pays 5% simple interest. How much is $6,000 worth in 5 years? This is one of those problems, you've probably seen them. They're interest problems. They always are difficult, and a lot of students struggle with them. Last one. What is the discounted price for a $100 sweater at Macy's that is marked 30% off? A very familiar situation to us, getting some sort of having a store run a sale, and they'll take some percentage off of the price of the item. All very common situations. As I said at the beginning, one of the reasons that students have trouble with word problems is that they either can't or don't try to identify what type a given word problem is. Another difficulty that I see is that they just read the problem quickly, they see some numbers, and they jump right in, adding and subtracting or multiplying or dividing or doing some sort of operation with the numbers without really understanding the problem. I think a far better way to attack a word problem is to read the problem, look at the different parts of the problem, and then write in words, not in numbers, write in words how those parts are related. For example, let's look at the first one, the Golden Corral buffet. If we look at this, we got a buffet cost, we got a sales tax, we got a total cost of the meal. How do those three relate to each other? Well, if you take the cost of the buffet just by itself and you add the sales tax, that's going to give you what the total cost of the meal is. So again, the key here is we're not worried about what the numbers are. We're just trying to understand in our heads how are these things related. Let's do the same thing with the next one. A taxi to the airport costs $25. You're going to tip the driver 20%, the total cost. So we have a fee of $25. You have a tip that you have to add on top of that, and those two will give you the total cost of the ride. So again, the taxi fare itself plus the tip is going to give you the total cost. Let's go to the third one. An Uber ride. So there's a flat fee, or the cost of the ride, plus there's a mileage piece, right? And if you add those two costs, then you should get the total cost of the trip. Fourth one. This one might be not so familiar to you. The savings account pays interest, and how much is it going to be worth in some number of years? The amount of money that you start with is called the principal. So if you take the principal and you add to it the interest that the bank is going to pay you to be able to use your money while it's in that account, if you add those two, that'll give you the total value of the account. Lastly, same process. If we got a discount on a sweater, it's some percentage off. So we know that you start with the regular price of the sweater and you subtract. The other problems we were adding, but no, this time we're subtracting. But you subtract the amount of the discount, and that'll give you the reduced price. So again, in all these problems, or in each of these problems, what we try to do is understand how the parts of the problem relate to each other. We haven't done anything with numbers so far. All right, let's take this thing one step further now. Let's start with the first problem, back to the buffet at the Golden Corral. We said the sales tax. Remember we said, okay, so if we describe the relationship between the parts in words, we said the buffet cost plus the sales tax equals the total cost. So if we look at the buffet cost, it's $12, right? It's $12 for everybody. So I refer to this as a fixed cost, right? You walk in there, they're going to say it's $12. I don't care how much you eat, it's $12. Then the next component of this is the sales tax. And if you're familiar with sales tax, you know that sales tax is a percentage of what the item cost. So in this case, since the sales tax is 6%, it's 6% of whatever the buffet costs. So if the buffet costs $12, it's going to be, the sales tax will be a certain amount. If the buffet, or if you had a different buffet or they raised the price to $15, it would still be 16% of that $15, but it would be a different number. So the amount of sales tax is going to vary depending on how much the buffet costs. So I refer to that as a variable component or variable number because it's dependent on something else. In this case, it's dependent upon the buffet cost. And again, if you contrast that against the buffet cost itself, remember it was $12. We don't care what the sales tax is or anything else, it's a fixed amount. All right? So let's try to apply that same logic and go through the process for the taxi to the airport. The taxi fare, right? It's $25. Just like the buffet cost, it doesn't matter who you are or any of the circumstances, it's always going to be a fixed cost of $25. Then you want to tip the driver, right? Well, the tip is similar to the sales tax because the tip is a percentage of whatever the main item is. In this case, whatever the price of the taxi fare is. So just like with the sales tax of the buffet, the tip depends on how much the taxi fare is. So it's a variable number, just like the sales tax was. And the reason it's because it depends on one of the other pieces of information in the problem. In this case, it's a percent of what the fare is. Let's do the Uber ride now. So the Uber ride, it's $2 plus 25 cents a mile. So the ride cost is the $2 portion. And again, that doesn't depend on any of the other parts of this problem. It's just a fixed $2. Now the mileage cost, if it's 25% per mile, this is a little bit different than the first two problems, right? Because the first two were percentages of something. But the mileage cost it's a 25 cents times the number of miles you go. So the thing it has in common with the other two problems that it's not a fixed cost. It depends on some other part of this problem. In this case, it's the number of miles that they need to ride. So it's variable because it depends on something else in the problem. In this case, the number of miles that you want to travel. So it's very similar to the other two. It's just slightly different. Let's do the savings account. The principal, well, it says the principal is $6,000, just again, a fixed number. The interest, and if you're familiar with how interest works, interest is a percentage of how much money you started with. And then we multiply it by the number of years, but I'm not so worried about that. The main point here is that the interest is a variable number simply because it depends on the principal. If the principal is larger, then the interest is going to be more. If the principal is smaller, then the interest is going to get smaller, right? So it's dependent on some other piece of information in the problem. Lastly, the sweater. So the regular price, it's a fixed amount, right? It's $100. The discount, and most of you are probably familiar with how a discount is calculated. A discount, in this case, when they say 30% off, it's a percent of the regular price. So again, just like in all the other problems, even though they look like they're a little bit different, they have that in common where one of the components here is a variable component. Again, because it depends on one of the other numbers in the problem. And in the case of the discounted sweater, the discount depends on how much the regular price was. So if you're getting a 30% discount and the price is $100, you get a certain amount of discount. But if the sweater is a higher price, you'll get a larger discount. If it's a lower price, you'll get a smaller discount. So the discount is the variable in the sense that it depends on and could change based on what the regular price is. Okay, we're done. Let's just summarize what we did here. We looked at all these word problems and they all had in common the fact that each one consisted of a fixed amount, and then we added or subtracted some variable amount to that. And when we did that, we ended up with the final amount. So again, remember, even these may look like different types of problems, but they're really not. they're all set up and solved in the same way. So sales tax, tipping, taxi rides, simple interest, sales discounts, even though they seem to be different kinds of problems, they're exactly the same. So if you can set up and solve one of these, you should be able to set up and solve all of them. In a future video and in class, we'll talk more about how to actually go ahead and do the algebra to solve each of these kinds of problems. So I would suggest that you write this down someplace in your notes so you remember it, and it's available to you to use later. So good luck, and thanks for watching.